Cool. So now we've covered the basics of medical astrology. This session covers patterns of energy. This is really the bridge between astrology, because this is still very relevant for medical astrology, and herbalism, because this is really relevant for herbalism. And you'll see as we get through the session how this all makes sense. So the agenda, we're going to cover tissue states, remedies for the tissue states, clinical application, and just some tips and takeaways. Tissue states. Throughout history, healers have observed distinct patterns in how the human body expresses health and disease through its energetic states. Drawing from the Greek medical wisdom and its four humoral qualities, we can understand these patterns through three fundamental pairs of opposing forces: hot and cold, which are the metabolic activity; damp and dry, which describe internal moisture levels; and tense and relaxed, which indicates tissue tones. So this serves as a foundation for herbal medicine. It creates a beautiful framework, and we can use this framework to better prescribe herbs, or it doesn't have to be herbs, but we can better prescribe or support our clients or family whose charts we are assessing or we want to treat herbally. Okay. Quick note, hot and cold, as I mentioned before, refers to the state of metabolism. Hot metabolism is quick, it's active, it metabolizes fast. Cold metabolism is slow and sluggish. Real prime example is hyper and hypo functioning thyroid. So a hyper functioning thyroid, the metabolism is fast, the people run hot, their heart rate is up, they're quite sweaty, there's all this heat, and that's a hot metabolism, that's a quick metabolism. Cold state of metabolism is quite like the hypothyroid picture. There's a sluggishness, there's coldness, there's weight gain. Damp and dry states of internal moisture. We see this quite often through the skin, the tongue, mucous membranes. We can see something's damp, which has a lot of mucus, or if it's dry. And tense and relaxed states of tissue tone. So let's talk about each of these. What does hot look like? Heat. Excess heat indicators, because we actually want a little bit of heat and we want a little bit of cool. We want the balance, we don't want to be too far either side. We want our tissue tone to be just right. We don't want too tense, too relaxed. All of these we want to be somewhere in the middle. And when they become too extreme one way or the other, that's when we get health issues. So heat, excess heat, so there's increased activity, irritation, which could be acute or chronic, elevated metabolic rate, temperature, classic inflammation, heat, redness, swelling, acute pain, red tongue, which could be pointed or elongated, dry or yellow coated, that indicates heat. Dry, scanty urine, because if there's a lot of heat, there's not a lot of moisture. Rapid bounding pulse, so if you read pulses or you're familiar with Chinese medicine, that's what it would present like if you're reading pulse. And naturally, the treatment for excess heat is a cooling remedy. Cold. So excess cold presents as underactivity, depressed function, reduced metabolic rate and temperature, pale white cold skin, possibly bluish, dull chronic pain, fatigue, lethargy, poor response to stimulation, a pale enlarged tongue with white coating, a slow, weak, often deep pulse. How is it treated? With heating, warming, stimulating remedies. I think it's all quite intuitive, and this makes a lot of sense. It's very straightforward. This isn't really too hard to learn. Damp. A damp person will have a general stagnation. There will be excess tissue fluids, poor circulation, insufficient electrolytes, lymphatic congestion, swollen tongue, scalloped edges, thick coating, a rolling slippery pulse, excess mucus, oily skin and hair. So there's a lot, they're exuding a lot and holding a lot of water. So, like a lot of edema, a lot of mucus, all of that. Very moon Venus kind of things. So treatment, you'd have drying or draining remedies. Dry, a really dry person, there's a general atrophy, dry, rough, leathery skin, and the person is usually quite thin and weak, excess minerals, insufficient fluids, brittle nails, hair, skin, bones, dry, cracked tongue, thin, weak, deep pulse. How do we treat this? Moistening, nourishing remedies. So I'm just looking at this, the dry also kind of like a bit of a malnutrition state, you can see. Tense tissue state, general constriction, muscle cramping or spasm, alternating conditions between, say, fever and chills, sharp moving pain, quivering tongue, tense wiry pulse. They can be nervous and highly strung. Stress aggravated conditions we'll be seeing commonly. Iris nerve ring signs. So if you do iridology, you'll see those rings through the iris. I can't remember what they're called, but you know, they indicate a lot of tension and stress. Treatment, so relaxing antispasmodic remedies. And relaxed tissue state. You will see general tissue relaxation, lack of tone. They may be flabby or there's a flabbiness. Excessive fluid secretion, leaking conditions, so incontinence or constant drainage. So where sphincters and things are meant to hold tight, hold things in, they may not be doing that. Pale, cool, moist skin, relaxed pulse, wet, coated tongue. Treatment is astringent and toning remedies, so things that contain tannins. So these states typically present in combination. You're not just a hot person, you're not just a tense person. Some common ones, we've got cold and damp, which is very lunar, phlegmatic. Hot and dry, Martian, which is that choleric humor. Cold, damp, and relaxed. And cold and tense, which I think would be a bit Saturnian. Treatment would be herbal therapeutics that target these specific combinations. So remedies for the tissue states. Hot heating remedies. So they activate the body's core temperature, promoting peripheral circulation and fluid movement. So this action helps thin and mobilize fluids, ultimately facilitating their release through the skin's pores. Mars, Sun, fire signs. So these are like heating in nature. So for example, we do start to cover herbs in this session, but non-herbal things, warm baths, sun exposure, warm clothing, warm food, spicy food, exercise. So they would support the circulation, get fluids moving, warm the body. We have also intensity levels and degrees of heating remedies. And this is predominantly talking about herbal medicine. You can see intensity level, first degree, stimulates surface circulation. So sweat promoting herbs, diaphoretics, that's a first degree heating. Second degree heating is a bit more heating. It promotes fluid movement. So herbs that clear mucus and release aromatics. Third degree, even warmer, activates core warmth. So we're getting deeper and deeper into the body. Blood moving herbs and digestive warmers. Think ginger. Fourth degree creates intense heat. So external heating agents like mustard. So things like a rubefacient, something that's really quite hot. Cold remedies. So these are things that moderate excessive heat while encouraging downward energy flow, supporting the body's natural cooling mechanisms. So Moon and Saturn being two very cool celestial bodies. Things like ice baths, swimming in cool water, hydration, cooling foods like raw vegetables. These would all help moderate excessive heat. So we're going through the intensity levels again. First degree cooling would be like having melon on a summer day. That'll cool you down a little bit. Second degree will actively reduce heat. So traditional fever herbs and cooling bitters. Third degree calms and quiets, so mind settling herbs and sleep supporters. So now we're looking at things like passion flower, things that actually sedate you. So it's not just physically cooling, but it's like mentally cooling, it's slowing things down. And fourth degree, strong pain relieving herbs like opium, so deeply numbing. So we've gone from physically cooling and reducing heat to sedating and numbing. So we have our damp remedies. So they support tissue hydration. So where you've got like a very dry state, you bring in the damp remedy. They are soothing and nourishing, and they sort of correlate with the water signs and the moon. So anything very lunar tends to be quite damp and moistening. First degree, just things that enhance moisture like marshmallow and slippery elm. Second degree promotes pliability, so tissue softening agents. Third degree builds substance, so digestive nourishes like oats. And fourth degree, actually more like purgative, so deep cleansing bitter herbs. So when there's damp, there can be a sluggishness and a toxic buildup. So even though the purgative, a type of herb or something that promotes clearing doesn't seem very obvious for a damp remedy, it is because where there's dampness, there tends to be just like a bit of a toxic buildup. So I hope that makes sense. And okay, so my picture is not here. Don't worry about that. But dry remedies for astringing and binding. So when there's a really moist, relaxed tissue state, we would bring in a dry remedy. So the first degree dry remedy would gently tone, so tissue supporting herbs, gentle astringents like green tea. We use that internally and externally, and it does have that astringing effect through its tannins. Second degree actively firms, so fluid balancing astringents. Third degree protective herbs for external conditions. So again, we are like improving the structural integrity. And fourth degree is a strong tissue strengthening herb. Relaxation remedies, so these are used to treat tension. They help release excessive constriction, ease spasms, and promote a balanced nervous system response. So we're looking at issues of like bronchoconstriction, muscle tension, nervous tension, and cramping. So we want to relax all these, and all those issues are very of the nature of air signs and Mercury. So we could use things like magnesium massage and stretching. And when we get into herbal medicine, we start at the first degree with gently relaxing things like nervines, chamomile, and lavender. We work up to antispasmodics, so we've got cramp bark, wild yam. Third degree, we've got stronger nerve relaxants, valerian, passion flower, skullcap. And fourth degree, profound muscle relaxants. Think like kava. So tension remedies, they treat excessive relaxation. They help restore tissue tone and strengthen lax or overly relaxed tissues. This is very much of the nature of Venus, Taurus, and water signs. Starting with the first degree. Oh, actually before that I've mentioned exercise. So that is a nice way to treat excess relaxation. It's quite stimulating. It can strengthen, it can tone, gets things moving. So first degree is something that's gently toning, maybe like raspberry leaf. Second degree, strengthening. So maritime pine has an amazing effect on the veins, the venous system, and it really strengthens it. Strong astringents at the third degree, so things like witch hazel and golden seal. And fourth degree are strong, profound tonics, butcher's broom, shepherd's purse. So all of these things tend to be, they're all astringents to some degree, really. So they are the tension remedies that we use to treat excess relaxation. So clinical application, how do we use this? So when there's tension, we match the intensity of the relaxant to the severity of the tension. So a little bit of tension, mild relaxant. Severe, strong relaxant. So acute spasms, which is very Uranian. Acute being like sudden and intense. We use a higher degree relaxant, something of the nature of the moon or Neptune, such as kava. Chronic tension, something that's kind of just ongoing for a longer time. We want to use something a bit gentler, a lower degree, longer term use, which is very lunar, and maybe we would choose something like chamomile. Now, I guess I should mention with the use of herbs, this can be just through teas. It doesn't have to be through like herbal tinctures like what I've got there. You know, herbs that you can access quite easily is often tea. So for relaxation, there's a relaxation state. You want to build tone gradually. So chronic weakness, which would be possibly Venusian. We start with first degree and then we build up. So maybe raspberry leaf. But an acute prolapse, which is very Venus in Scorpio. A higher degree may be needed immediately, such as witch hazel or witch's brew. So chronic ongoing things tend to be treated lower and slower, whereas acute things, we may match the intensity and acute nature with something else that's quite intense and used for a short amount of time. And balance is crucial. Avoid over-relaxing tense tissues or over-toning relaxed tissues. Consider combining with the appropriate temperature, hot and cold, and moisture, based on the complete tissue state picture. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And, you know, if someone's warm, cool them off. If someone's tense, help them relax. You know, you're just treating with the opposite. Successful herbal therapy requires matching remedies to tissue states for optimal balance restoration. So hot and dry conditions, very Martian, apply cool and moistening herbs, which are herbs of the moon and Venus. And we will go into this actually in the next lecture, the planets and the herbs that sort of come under them. Get a cool and damp condition, which is very lunar, apply warm and drying herbs, solar. Hot and damp condition, which might be Jupiter, perhaps Venus, probably just Jupiter, apply cooling and drying herbs, so Saturn. A cold and dry condition, Saturn, apply warming, moistening herbs, that's Jupiter and Venus. Accurate assessment of tissue states is really fundamental and helps with the herb selection, but you don't necessarily have to use herbs. So final tips, takeaways, always assess the whole picture. Tissue states rarely exist in isolation. For example, you might have a cold, dry stomach, but you may have a warm, tense head because you're hyperactive and you've got a lot of constriction in your jaw, but your stomach, you're having trouble digesting, you know, you don't tolerate black tea or something, it nauseates you. So there's two different tissue states going on. Observe tongue, demeanor, skin temperature, health issue, and tissue quality. So you're looking at the whole person to tell the tissue state. You're not just basing it on one thing. Consider acute versus chronic. Like I said before, something that's acute you may treat a bit more oomph, a bit punchy. Chronic is something that you may want to treat low and slow. Consider patient sensitivity and strength. A particularly robust, strong man who doesn't get affected by much, you know, he can probably tolerate something that's a bit stronger than a sensitive, delicate little female, for example. Just consider their strength and sensitivity. Match remedy degree to severity of condition. So if the condition isn't too severe, you probably don't need a 4th degree remedy. And be cautious with 4th degree remedies in general. They're powerful and can overwhelm. So you don't really have to remember the degrees as such. It's just that, there are certain herbs and things that are more intense than others, like swimming in the swimming pool to cool you off or having a piece of watermelon is very different to taking an ice bath. An ice bath can overwhelm because then all of a sudden your nervous system is having this big shock, and then your whole body can go into shock. And look, there's a place for ice baths, but I'm using that as an example of a very gentle remedy, which is eating something cooling just to cool you off, and then having an ice bath. Okay, all done, and I will see you in the next session.